Welcome to Best Served Cold, a look at action movies. Now, my name is Matt. This is the Dice Geeks YouTube channel, of course. And what I am doing here is I'm taking a look at movies from kind of the perspective of how we can use movies and stories to help us tell better stories when we're running tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons or some other game. And I think we can draw inspiration from stories from all over the place. And I love action movies, so we're going to take a look at some of this. Now, when I started this presentation, I was a bit ambitious in saying, let's take a look at action movies, because there's a lot of action movies. And also that anytime you start to categorize movies, it's kind of a fool's errand to really try to do that, to really try to narrow down what genre some of these movies belong to, because action movies can cross all genres, right? So calling a movie an action movie can be a little confusing, or at least it confused me when I started looking into it. So let's take a look at some movies. Now, this is, like I said, kind of the main goal here is for people who play tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons or something else, so we can learn how to tell better stories, so we can draw story moments or story situations from these movies. But if you're just a movie fan, you're going to get some movie history kind of along the way. And if you're just a D&D player and you're just like, I need to become a better dungeon master, well, you're going to get some additional information as well, because, well, like I said, I love action movies. So let's kind of just start to dive in, and we're going to go way, way, way back. All right, so this is the Great Train Robbery, 1903. This is, of course, not without controversy, but it is usually considered to be the first action movie. And, we see here there is crime involved. So whenever you have crime, right, there's kind of this inherent drama built around crime. And so when we're running tabletop RPGs, we can think, how do we just create drama automatically? Well, we can have a crime happen. We can have the action kind of center around solving a crime or bringing the perpetrators of a crime to justice, which is just what this movie is. Somebody robs a train, and then a posse hunts down the outlaws. This movie is available for free. A movie this old is not copyrighted anymore, so you can find it on the Wikipedia page. It just has a file there. You can just watch the movie right on the Wikipedia page. It's a pretty fun movie. If you haven't seen a silent movie this old before, I definitely suggest that you check it out. It's very short as well. It's only like 12 minutes or something like that. This kind of brings us to what I was saying just a moment ago about organizing or putting films into categories. This is called an action movie, but we're kind of retroactively going back and calling this an action movie, right? Because at the time, this was just a contemporary movie. And we're also kind of retroactively going back and calling this a Western when it was just contemporary, right? The Wild West was still going on in 1903, right? It's a Western, it's an action movie, but it is a contemporary film that was just made. So it is a crime movie, if you wanted to be a little bit more precise. So when we're running games, let's think about how can we use the solving of crimes or the pursuit of evildoers. Those kind of story hooks are very upfront and center and right there for us to grab a hold of. Now, moving forward just a little bit in time, we're kind of in the golden age of the silent movie, right? We have Douglas Fairbanks, Robin Hood. Again, this one's called an action movie nowadays, but again, this is kind of a retroactive kind of category that is applied to this movie. Of course, Robin Hood back in the day, it more fits the bill of an adventure story, right? That we would usually call those adventure stories. And just thinking about Robin Hood or a movie like this, what would be some of the main action or some of the main tropes, right? So we have oppressive authority. We have a good person or a good man who's forced into banditry because of this oppressive leader who is abusing the people, abusing their power. We have a rescue, a kidnapping in a sense, right? We have disguise, impersonation when Robin goes to the archery contest. So you can just think about some of those ideas when we're running a tabletop RPG, right? See, these are some very common ideas, right? Impersonation, oppressive leaders, good people forced into difficult or tough situations where they have to break the law of somebody who is in authority, but somebody who is abusing that authority, right? And that puts them at jeopardy, even though they want to do good. A kidnapping, a rescue, right? Robin has to rescue Maid Marian, who's being kept in the tower. These are just ideas and tropes, and some may say cliche, but these are good building blocks that we can use to build stories when we're running our tabletop RPG campaigns, when we're building our D&D campaigns and our D&D sessions. We take these building blocks, not necessarily an archery tournament, but it could be an archery tournament. But there you take something and force the players to have their characters wear disguises, make them impersonate somebody, make them solve a crime of a kidnapping, make them rescue somebody, make them fight against an oppressive authority. These are all ideas that you can use when you're creating your RPG campaigns. And now we're in the early sound era, right? This is Errol Flynn, Captain Blood. This is a pirate movie. This is a great movie. If you haven't seen this, you definitely should see Captain Blood. Now, also, Errol Flynn's famous for being in his own version of Robin Hood as well. So again, we're kind of getting these adventure stories, right? So we have pirates, but let's think about pirates, right? What is dramatic about pirates? Well, there is kind of a state of anarchy or weak state power that allows, for large scale criminal enterprises of pirates to operate almost without any threat of being captured or killed or brought to justice for their crimes. Now, that is there, of course, but the ocean is big. There are many, many islands. It is very difficult for the law or for the state to kind of find these outlaws, find the pirates and to bring them to justice. So a lot of times, good sea captains are relied upon to bring kind of a frontier justice to the pirates, as it were. And these are some just tropes that you can think of and use in your campaigns. A great movie, by the way. But again, as far as movies go, right, this is, again, a retroactive kind of calling this an action movie. This would have been called an adventure story. It's a great movie. Definitely should check it out. Now, I'm skipping quite a bit here in time. We go to the late 50s, skipping over some amazing films and some amazing eras in Hollywood, right? The whole film noir kind of period of Hollywood. Of course, those films were crime movies, right? Those were crime movies. And we've seen that you can use crime in a way to raise drama in no matter whatever setting that you're playing in. If you're playing in D&D, if you're playing in a modern day setting, a futuristic setting, there's crime. You can build a drama and adventure around that. Now, a movie like this, North by Northwest, of course, we have Hitchcock, a master at telling tales, a master at filmmaking as well. This movie, while it is now called in some cases an action movie, it's more of a drama with kind of an action set piece, right? There's a famous sequence with the airplane and the cornfield and Cary Grant at the end of the movie, or near the end of the movie, that is kind of actiony, but it's not really what you think of when we think of the word action movie, right? It would almost be better to call this a thriller, but sometimes it is called an action movie, right? When we usually conjure up the word action movie and we think of that, we usually think of, like, I opened the presentation, right? Best served cold. We think of revenge. And also the first slide with explosions. We think of explosions. Not many happening here in North by Northwest. So maybe a thriller would be better than this, but some people still do call this an action movie. And now here, this is just an example, of course, from the 40s and 50s and 60s. War movies were very, very popular and very, very prevalent as well. So here we have the Guns of Navarone, Gregory Peck, David Nevin, Anthony Quinn, amazing cast, amazing movie in its own right. But there were many, many World War II movies, right? Just tons of them. And these get labeled as action movies usually nowadays. But again, a lot of them don't fit kind of the bill that we were thinking of, if we're thinking of certain, big explosions, big tough guy kind of roles. Doesn't exactly fit. But we can see here when we're running our RPG campaigns, right? War is one of those things, just like crime. War is drama, right? War just provides a backdrop for all kinds of drama. Combat, life is on the line. There are villains, there are enemies, there are traps, there are rescues, there are missions that need to be accomplished to gather information to destroy certain bases or fortifications. There are attacks that have to be made. So there is drama just all over the place. There are, invading armies, conquering towns, innocent people are being displaced. I mean, war just screams drama. And so those things, when we're thinking about our RPG campaigns, when we're thinking about Dungeons and Dragons or whatever game we're playing, we can use war. If that's the kind of campaign we want to run, war is a very easy template to kind of give us all of those action kind of tropes that we can explore to have our players, encounter those and have them have more fun, right? Now, also here in the 60s, right, we see kind of a new kind of action movie, what usually gets called action. We get the spy thriller, right? I would call it another one. I would say thriller more than action, right? Because, while there's some gunplay and some of that, there's not a lot of what we might call action. But here, James Bond does start getting into some of this action with guns and explosions and supervillains. We start seeing that in film a bit more, right? And so, of course, James Bond gives us lots of tropes that we can use in our RPG campaigns, spy, espionage campaigns, like I mentioned, supervillains. Of course, James Bond also incorporates technology, right? Some gadgets and kind of convoluted plans to take over the world or to destroy the world's water supply or to destroy all the satellites around Earth or to whatever. James Bond kind of gives us all of those things. And of course, impersonating people, right? The spy usually has to pretend to be somebody else so they can sneak into a casino and get close to the evil villain who's going to, rip away Earth's ozone layer and then set up his own fiefdom in the deserts that remain or whatever it is. So we start getting into this in the 60s, very influential type movies. Absolutely really changes kind of the course of where Hollywood is going with some of these films. Now we're in the 1970s, 1970. We get Dirty Harry, right? And this kicks off, if we're just talking about the evolution of action movie, well, here we start to see some of the kind of the modern day, kind of cliches that we would talk about, right? We have a super tough guy, right? He's in the role, super tough guy. He's a cop. This is very common in action movies, but, Dirty Harry, not exactly that actiony, right? A fine movie for what it is, but it's not, a ton of action here, right? Clint Eastwood as Dirty Harry is solving crimes, and he just happens to shoot people with a huge gun occasionally. And, so again, we're kind of drawn back to this idea of crime and putting our heroes, our role-playing game, player characters into a world where they can solve crimes, where they're dealing with crime. Perhaps they're police officers, perhaps they're private detectives, or in some other form of investigator, right? This gives us the ability to put them right in the center of a drama, of a crime. And so we see here that action movies, definitely in the 70s, start really looking at and focusing on tough urban cops, and that's going to continue kind of on for quite some time. But now, on the other side of the world entirely, something else was brewing in feature films, right? And this is the martial arts film. Of course, there are many that precede Enter the Dragon, but this is one of the most iconic movies, right? This is the hero as a weapon, right? Bruce Lee does not need his .44 Magnum like Dirty Harry. Bruce Lee is the weapon. His body is the weapon. Sure, he's going to use nunchucks like you see there, but he is the weapon. His body is the weapon. His mind has been attuned to martial arts, and he is going to use his body to bring about the right and to take down the evil villain, right? And so some tropes here in Enter the Dragon, which can be very useful, right? You have kind of a island that has been taken over by a evil person, right? A villain who is trying to raise an army of warriors, who's hosting secret competitions to find the best warriors, things like that. Can also be great tropes that we can use in our RPG campaigns when we're telling stories, right? And now, I've been talking about this, and some people may be like, oh, you're just talking about using cliches all the time. Well, maybe, but I kind of resist to call them cliches. I want to, possibly trope is a better word, because, this forbidden island, this, a super villain, raising an army, kind of martial arts, maybe smuggling is involved and different things like that. While they could be cliches, they can also be used, like I said, as a trope that would just allow then you as a game master, you as a dungeon master, kind of take a leap off and really make something unique, even though it feels familiar to your players just a little bit, where they might be able to say, oh, that something like that happened in Enter the Dragon. Oh, something like that happened in Robin Hood. These are just all situations that we can use to help improve our game mastering, because I think you're going to find, as we look at some of these movies, they share a lot of these elements. A lot of movies share the same elements kind of over and over again. A rescue, a oppressive leader, a supervillain with a plan, somebody trying to raise an army, forbidden islands, secret martial art competitions. Those things are just awesome, frankly, and they can be used over and over again in some really cool and interesting ways in Dungeons and Dragons, in fantasy settings, or in science fiction, modern day, whatever. Now, here we're continuing on in the 70s, and of course, some more martial arts, right? This is Chuck Norris, right? Good Guys Wear Black. This movie's interesting in a number of ways because John T. Booker, right here, he's our hero. He is a Vietnam veteran, and Vietnam is kind of used just as a way to get him skills, right? It's his background is he was a soldier in Vietnam, so now he has skills. He was working for the CIA. Kind of interesting idea there, right? You need some way, usually, right, to get people to have the skills to be able to participate in a martial art, slugfest or a good shootout or something like that, because normal people don't have those skills. So what also is interesting about Good Guys Wear Black here is that the government, of course, is now the enemy, right? Post Watergate, the government is corrupt, and the government is hanging out good, honest, heroic Americans. They're hanging them out to dry, and putting them on the line, and killing them to cover up their corrupt government practices as they try to seize power and things like that. And of course, like I mentioned, this is Watergate, in the aftermath of Watergate and some other governmental scandals, right? So John Booker here has to fight back against somebody in the CIA who wants him dead. And that can be some really good tropes that you can use in your campaigns as well, right? The government that seems good but is actually corrupt, the former soldier who's now a liability to a corrupt person's path to power. Those are all kind of interesting ways that you can suck your players into the story a bit more, kind of draw them in with some of these active hooks that we can get from, a movie just like this Chuck Norris movie right here. All right, I threw this one in, 36 Chamber of Shaolin. Again, we're still in the 70s. This movie, what makes this movie interesting, there's kind of the quintessential training montage in this movie, right? That our hero has to go through this big training montage, carrying, buckets of water and going through all kinds of crazy, kind of death traps almost, but they're training and they're learning how to become this weapon, this master of Shaolin. And again, those are some things that we can use in our games. Maybe training isn't too exciting, but there are different ways that we can use some of that in our games if we are thinking creatively. And anyway, I just wanted to throw it in because it is a fun movie. All right, The Road Warrior, or for our friends outside the United States, this is also called Mad Max 2. The Road Warrior, to me, is kind of a quintessential action movie. It may be one of the greatest action movies ever made, right? And it has a mainstay of what is going to be incorporated throughout action movies, and that is car chases. Okay, so some of the older movies that we kind of retroactively call action movies don't have a lot of car chases, but now The Road Warrior is like the epitome of car chase. A huge chunk of the movie is taken up with a car chase. It is spectacular. It is filmed brilliantly by George Miller. I can't imagine if somebody is watching if they haven't seen it, but if you haven't seen The Road Warrior, you need to see it. I think it is one of the greatest action movies ever made. But now we're getting into some of these tropes like I mentioned before, right? So what is Mad Max, right? He is a former cop, right? So he's a tough guy. He's a former police officer. He's got some skills. He knows how to drive a car. And of course, I didn't include the first movie here. And while it has some spectacular action in it, it is a drama about Max's family, his wife and his child, and then his subsequent revenge. So it is a fantastic movie, and you definitely should see Mad Max. But I included The Road Warrior for sake of time, and because The Road Warrior is like all the base elements of an action movie kind of all in place, and it is told expertly. And you definitely need to see this, definitely need to experience this movie, right? Because we have very clear villains. We have a hero who is on the edge of society. We have a society is trying to rebuild itself. And of course, now here, this is kind of the first movie that I'm talking about, action movie that I'm talking about that incorporates a bit of the sci-fi, right? A bit of science fiction. The first Mad Max, society was kind of degrading and kind of disintegrating. In Road Warrior, we see that there have been a great war has taken place, even though we get the the story told from a future perspective of somebody looking way back, of trying to piece together the history, which is an amazing element, if I might say. Is a very powerful story technique, and that is something we can use in our games as well. Somebody who from the far future is looking back at, say, like our time, or a little bit ahead of us in the future, and piecing together what happened out of the rubble, right? And trying to say, instead of knowing the names of the great warring countries, they just call them great warring tribes and things. And those, very clear to us that the filmmakers were talking about the United States and the Soviet Union, but kind of leaves that ambiguity in there that shows that people have forgotten a lot. They're trying to piece together the history. Amazing film. And we can take also a lot of inspiration from a movie like this, right? Like trying to repair a vehicle, trying to move people out of a dangerous place, guarding a caravan of valuables. All of those can be taken out of the Road Warrior, and they help our games immensely. Okay, Rambo. Now, this is interesting. I picked this image. It says Rambo, but the movie is First Blood, right? Rambo, the character of John Rambo, kind of takes on a life of its own, especially in the 80s. And I mean, well, the films are continuing to this day, I guess, and they will until Sylvester Stallone is done acting, or we reboot the whole character and just call somebody else Rambo, I guess. But the first movie is just called First Blood. Rambo is added afterwards, after people are drawn to this iconic character. Well, what we see in First Blood, right? Again, not a ton of action, some action, but it's more of John Rambo, kind of almost an internal drama about him dealing with the trauma of the Vietnam War. We also see here developing another trope, and that is the troubled veteran, right? That the veteran has come back from the war. He can't leave it behind. He is traumatized. He is troubled by his experiences, and he does not know how to integrate into normal society anymore. And again, that could be used in our games when we are running our sessions. All right, so here, the Terminator, very famous film, obviously. Everybody, I'm sure, has heard of the Terminator, but here, absolutely, the Terminator is an action movie. We also see the sci-fi elements again, right? That we are introduced to the future in a post-nuke kind of future. Then we come back in time to where we have the main action play out and how that's going to affect the future in the long run. Some great elements that we can use in our games, even if you're doing fantasy or modern day, right? We have the main character of Sarah Connor, who is a normal person who is swept up in a larger, history, right? A larger destiny for her that she did not even realize was, at first what was going to happen. And that can be a great thing to use for our Dungeons & Dragons campaigns, our role-playing game campaigns, right? That maybe our players come to the table, they've created what they think are normal mercenaries, normal adventurers, and then we're going to reveal that they have a greater destiny and a greater part to play in the future of mankind, or if you're doing science fiction, right? Maybe the characters are a simple band of freighter captains, and they're hauling cargo back and forth, but then there's a greater destiny that's going to be revealed, right? This is a way to pull our characters into something greater and bigger than themselves and what they realized at the first. And also, right, I mean, we have cyborgs, we have a post-nuclear holocaust, we have other ideas and tropes that we can use. The idea of machines, intelligent machines that have exterminated mankind. And these are ideas that are out there and can be reused. And, like I said, maybe some people would call them cliches. I call them tropes. People love this stuff. I love this. If somebody's running a game and and they're introducing some elements like this, I'm going to love it because it seems a little bit familiar, but we always got to put our own twist on it, our own kind of our own stamp. And that's just the way kind of it is with everything and with all storytelling, right? We're using some of the same building blocks, but we're just going to tell it in a different way from our own point of view and our own gaming group as we tell a collaborative story together. All right, so here we got missing in action. So Chuck Norris is going to get in on some of the action. I'm saying action a lot, right? So now Chuck Norris, he was a Vietnam veteran before, but now he's kind of a troubled veteran, right? Because after First Blood, everybody's going to be a troubled veteran. And so Chuck Norris is going to go back to Vietnam and he's going to rescue some POWs that are being held there. And so this, again, these are just some tropes that we can use in our games, right? We're going to go back. We're going to rescue somebody. We're going to go back to where we were traumatized to rescue some of our countrymen. And this is a very powerful story, really, and can be used in our games to great effect, right? And he's also, at the same time, has to dodge around all kinds of slimy political figures. So some great stuff here. A fun movie in its own right, but these are just some great tropes that we can use in games. All right, so here we're back with Arnold and Commando. Commando is like the quintessential 80s action movie. It should be in the dictionary next to action movie. Commando is where kind of almost in a certain sense the action movie reaches kind of its height, right? This is the ultimate tough guy, the ultimate soldier guy. All of the lines are like one-liners as he offs all of his victims on his way to rescue his kidnapped daughter. And of course, we have, again, a lot of the tropes. We have tropes of one that is very prevalent that I haven't mentioned just yet. We have betrayal. Right? We've seen bits of that in Good Guys Wear Black and Missing in Action, but in Commando, right? Arnold's former, army buddies have now betrayed him and kidnapped his daughter, and they have betrayed America. And they have decided, right, to get revenge on him for some perceived slight or something like that when they were back running missions all over the globe. And of course, just from a film history perspective, now in the 80s, the action movie becomes defined, like I said. Commando, action movie, yes. It is not anything but an action movie. I mean, you could say a war movie or something like that, but it is an action movie, and we get this codifying of action. And I think really that's where the term kind of came from, is in the 80s when we started seeing movies like Commando and some of the other ones that we're going to touch on. We get this idea of an action movie that can't really be classed as anything else, right? It can't be classed as a Western. It can't be classed as a drama. It is, it's not really, while there's gunfire and explosions, it's not really a war movie either. It is just an action movie, a man out for revenge, a man out to rescue his daughter, his wife, whatever. You just fill in the blanks there. It is a fun movie, definitely worth seeing. All right, so now we get Rambo, First Blood Part 2. This is, like I said, the first movie was just called First Blood, but the character of Rambo took over the public imagination as well, right? It was a very popular character. Also, the first movie, First Blood, not too actiony. Rambo, First Blood Part 2, action all the way, right? Stallone is going to go back to Vietnam. He is going to rescue POWs, kind of now a familiar trope. And it's just action kind of nonstop, right? Explosions, torture is another element that is brought into play here in Rambo First Blood Part 2. Again, just so many tropes that we can build on when we're running games. Somebody who has been traumatized has to go back to free their friend or their countrymen while being traumatized, like, yet again, and then trying to break free from that place and put those demons or those ghosts to rest. All right, Chuck Norris, Invasion USA. Right now, see the Chuck Norris movies. Right, these were much lower budget than the Stallone and Schwarzenegger movies. Right, but Chuck was here. He was always kind of in the background. Very interesting movie. There's a lot of other ones. Delta Force. Delta Force is a very good movie. Definitely should check it out. Invasion USA. Invasion USA has some, why I included this one is because it has some very powerful imagery where a neighborhood, kind of a normal suburban neighborhood, is attacked and a mall is attacked. They were able to use a real neighborhood and blow it up, and they were able to use a real shopping mall and blow it up. So it really has some authenticity to the movie. Getting a little over the top with dual wielding machine gun, dual wielding Uzis here. But Chuck Norris is saving the world because that's what Chuck Norris does, right? And again, these are all things that we can use in our games, right? We're just thinking about this, right? Invasion, right? Somebody is going to invade your homeland. An invasion is a very powerful idea, right? Drama is just written all over it because, again, it's just another aspect of kind of a war movie, right? And those ideas can just be used right in our games. All right, now also in the 80s, right, in the mid 80s, again, something else was going on the other side of the world, right? This movie is A Better Tomorrow. And it is a film by John Woo. So what we have here is we kind of have this urban police officers against mafia, kind of all in a seedy city urban environment, right? And this is where John Woo really has started developing some of his distinctive style, right? That the violence is very over the top, very showy, very maybe even glamorous in some way, right? Somebody gets shot with a shotgun and they fly 40 feet. We see this kind of style of film kind of going on here as well in the 80s, right? This urban cop kind of idea, dealing with gangsters and mafia and crime and drugs and all of this that can be used, all of those things that can be used in our tabletop role-playing games. Now, Aliens, right? Now, I didn't include the first one because the first Alien movie is a horror movie straight up. Aliens is an action movie. And of course, this is James Cameron who gave us Terminator. And again, we have a sci-fi element, which I always find interesting that sci-fi and action movies really go hand in hand. And so here we have Aliens. Right, this is, the mystery of an alien that just views us as food or views us as a host, right? These are ideas that we can use in our games. We have a base that has been just ransacked and all the people have been killed, and now our team has to go into that. It's very scary. There are dangers around every corner, kind of like a dungeon in Dungeons and Dragons. This sci-fi, base or colony and facility, is just like a dungeon in Dungeons and Dragons, right? We're going through it and there are monsters and we can't see too far ahead of us, right? Or when we get glimpses, it is terrifying. And so these are some things that we can put in our games, right? That there is a place that has been destroyed and their monsters are overrunning it, and our team has to go in and has to figure it out. And guess what? They're going to find a survivor, a young girl or a young boy, right? They're going to find a survivor. They're going to find some clues about what happened. A larger conspiracy is going to be revealed, right? That the government was trying to get all the aliens and breed these creatures and things because, the government's evil and bad and all that. So these are some great ideas to use in our games. Also, Aliens is like nonstop action. There is so much happening, so much conflict. James Cameron is, brilliant, just absolutely brilliant at creating this. Definitely a movie worth seeing. All right, Schwarzenegger again, Predator, right? Here again, we have action plus sci-fi. We have an alien who comes to Earth on a hunting spree, right? This is an update also of a Most Dangerous Game. And it just works, right? With the alien hunting special forces soldiers in a jungle, it just works. Very, very good movie. Lot of tropes here, right? We have the military, we have shady government officials, then we have this alien who's coming here, who's on a big game hunt, right? He is on a hunt of people, right? Because he doesn't, view the value of life the same way we do, right? He's just on a hunting spree. He is here to enjoy the hunt. And he is pitted against, right, our heroes who have to overcome this and figure out, what the mystery is behind this, that it is an alien, and that he is here on a hunting spree. He's here to collect trophies, right? These are all great tropes that can be used. And of course, The Most Dangerous Game is like one of the greatest action tropes ever. The old short story where the rich guy is bored and now needs to hunt somebody with an intellect, right? So that is like one of the biggest tropes in any kind of action movies right there that can be used in our role-playing games as well. Again, Schwarzenegger again, right? He made a lot of these movies. So we get The Running Man. Again, science fiction combined with action. But now here, The Running Man, right? The Running Man is also going to bring in some other ideas that we haven't seen yet, right? We have media, we have constant surveillance, we do have a corrupt government, but now they're manipulating surveillance technology to frame people, to frame good people. We're playing a game again where the masses, who are these beleaguered, hungry, half-starved people in a dismal, post-apocalyptic wrecked city, are just trying to, get some entertainment, and the government is feeding them this bloody game of where people are pitted against people in kind of a, a new age gladiatorial combat, right? And so these are all tropes and ideas that we can use in our games, right? What is the government up to? Is there a gladiatorial pit or games that we can put our characters in or have them confront? If we're playing sci-fi, obviously media surveillance and manipulation are very powerful, even in our day and age. So these would be some great tropes to put into our game. Die Hard, another quintessential action movie from the 80s, right? This movie kind of combines all of, I don't know if they're tropes or devices, if you want to call them like literary or cinematic devices, right? He is trapped in a building. There's a time limit placed on him. He is alone, and he has to use his wits to figure out how to save a whole bunch of innocent people, right? And so this movie can teach us a lot about how to tell a great story, how to use a dungeon, in fact, right? If you look at the building as a dungeon, our players are trapped in a dungeon. They have a time limit. They have to get to the end. Innocent people are at risk. Maybe the city's at risk. We can up the stakes that way and use these ideas in our games. A very interesting movie, very 80s movie if you want to check this out. You may also notice from a Hollywood or standpoint or a movie history standpoint, a lot of these movies in the 80s were made by the same people, right? John McTiernan, you see over and over again, and directed Predator, directed Die Hard. The writer of some of these movies wrote a lot of the same ones. So these were made, and then of course they star, Arnold and Sylvester, right? So a lot of these have the same stars, a lot of writers, a lot of same directors, and it's just an interesting kind of trivia tidbit. I think it's probably why we got some of this, movies that you might think, oh, well, that's kind of similar to that. Well, it's because a lot of the same people were making these movies. All right, so we get Steven Seagal. This is 1987, the same year as Die Hard and Predator and Running Man, all 1987. And so we get Steven Seagal, right? He's a karate guy, but he also uses some handguns and that. And so this is kind of another kind of more lower budget movies. but again, still playing on some of these concepts, right? That of revenge, or that the law can't help us, right? That that we would just go to the police, but we can't. We would hire a lawyer, but we can't, right? We need a hero. We need somebody who is above the law, right? Somebody who can come in and right all the wrongs that somebody is doing. All right, Bloodsport. We're still in 1987. My goodness, what a year. Bloodsport. So this introduced us to Jean-Claude Van Damme. Bloodsport is about a secret tournament of fighting to the death in Hong Kong, based on the true story, as it says here on the poster. Of course, it was all a lie, just like all my childhood, or most of it. But here, right, these tropes of a secret martial arts competition, this seedy underbelly of fighting where there are no rules kind of thing. This is just amazing stuff that can be used in our role-playing game sessions. Also on my podcast, the dicegeeks.com tabletop RPG show, I have talked to a canon film historian about Bloodsport. Great story there. You should check out that episode on my podcast. Stallone, Rambo 3. Right now we're going to go to Afghanistan. We're going to kick the Soviets out of Afghanistan. Again, just straight up action movie pretty much from start to finish here with Rambo 3. Again, right, these are some of the, some of the tropes that we're seeing kind of over and over again, right? The Soviets are in Afghanistan. We don't like the Soviets, but we can't act against them openly, so we have to send in the tough guy. We have to send in Rambo. We have to send in that person who has the skills but is not bound by law, or anything like that, whose hands are not tied by red tape, who can actually get the job done and rescue his friend who has been kidnapped by the evil Soviets. So again, another rescue, another kidnapping. So you'll see a lot of these stories are built around a crime of kidnapping or rescue. La Femme Nikita. This movie made a huge sensation in the early 90s, kind of introduced us to the actor Jean Reno, also to the filmmaker Luc Besson. Luc Besson is still very active today, making tons and tons and tons of movies. But this one, of course, flips the action movie on its head. We have a female hit woman assassin kind of figure. Some similar tropes of betrayal and jobs gone bad. Actually, that's one I hadn't really mentioned, right? The heist, right? The idea of a job or an assassination, right? But it's going to go bad, right? It's going to go terribly wrong, and our assassins are going to be on the run. Our the perpetrators of the crime are just thrown back onto their heels and have to deal with a crazy situation, and then they usually get betrayed and things like that. So an interesting film. Definitely should check that out. Hard Boiled. All right, so this is John Woo. This is when John Woo was really becoming famous. So this is another one of his Hong Kong movies. We have Chow Yun-fat, who's amazing, by the way. Hard Boiled is, just like over the top violence, right? Like the shotgun here in Chow Yun-fat's hand, right? He shoots that, hit the bad guys, fly 40 feet in the air in slow motion. There is a huge shootout that takes place in a maternity ward in a hospital. That's why he's holding the baby. Oh my gosh, it will blow your mind. And we also start getting to go really kind of over the top a bit with some of the action here, because there's like a cop and a bad guy shooting over top of newborn babies is like totally crazy. But there's definitely some stuff here that you can use in Hard Boiled. Definitely should check it out. It has to be seen to be believed. All right, so now John Woo comes to Hollywood, right? And he's going to do Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme. An interesting film. We get some of John Woo's kind of some of his, I guess, signature marks, right? The slow motion. Characters are kind of introduced with like thunderclaps in the background, or at least the villain is. We get some pigeons and doves flying all over. We all know of John Woo's fascination with pigeons and doves from Face Off. But here, in Hard Target, even like a pigeon is like sitting on Jean-Claude Van Damme's shoulder, and Van Damme gives the pigeon a nod, like, yeah, we're gonna do this. Like, what is going on here? This is kind of just another remake of A Most Dangerous Game, right? A rich supervillain is giving people the right to hunt humans, right? He is providing them the means to hunt human beings because they're bored. They're bored and they're rich and they don't know what to do with all their money and their time except for hunting down innocent homeless people who happen to be veterans or whatever. So interesting film, definitely worth seeing. A lot of tropes here that involve The Most Dangerous Game again. All right, Stallone, Demolition Man, Wesley Snipes, awesome. Wesley Snipes, so cool. Demolition Man, right? We have action, we have sci-fi again, right? In this movie, we get introduced to kind of a really interesting idea of the future. The hero and the villain are put in cryo prison, I guess, and they're frozen, and then they're woken up in a future where there is no crime, and it is very strange, right? But of course, it is a dystopian future, right? It seems good on the outside, but it's actually something very evil and something very wrong is going on under the surface. And, well, I mean, almost literally, right? Because there are underground dwellers who can't fit into the perfect or so-called perfect society that has been created on the surface. Very interesting, some of these ideas about how the future would look. Some of them are a little silly, but some of them are quite good, like the idea of multiple pandemics so they don't shake hands anymore. That's kind of an interesting kind of prophetic as we're going through some things here in 2021 with pandemics. So some really good tropes here, kind of the idea that if there is a supervillain, he's going to have his foil with a super cop, right? And we also have an iconoclastic kind of battle, right? That the past cop is going to not only bring down the supervillain, but he's going to reveal that this world you're living in, this perfect world you're living in, is a dystopian future, and he's going to bring that down as well. Speed, right? We get a cop. Now we have some devices, right? This idea of the bomb on the bus, that if it drops below 50 miles an hour, it's going to explode, right? So this could be used in your games. What kind of device can you use to keep your players on the move, keep them moving, keep them in some kind of adventure? You can use those devices every once in a while to really hook them into a situation, right? So you put them in a certain situation where they have to be very clever and they have to use all of their skills to get out of that, right? So that's kind of the idea here behind Speed. True Lies, right? We get Arnold here in the 90s with his spy. Basically, he's James Bond in this movie. We all know that, but he's married and a family man, but he's James Bond and he's lives this double life as a spy and a family man. Again, some great action here. James Cameron is awesome. Arnold is great. The cast in this movie is really, really good. Some great ideas here. People trying to get a hold of nukes and threatening mankind with that. Those are some good tropes, right? This doomsday weapon that could fall into the wrong hands. A very powerful trope that can be used in our games as well, right? It could be a magic ring, I guess. It could also be, some other type of magic artifact. It could be an alien technology, depending on what kind of game you're running. The Rock, usually considered one of the great action movies, kind of the newer ones. This, of course, is Michael Bay. Again, we have Sean Connery, who's kind of almost playing James Bond in the background, but, is under a different name. But we have kind of this idea of a military officer who feels betrayed by his government. So now he is going to take matters into his own hand, and he is going to possibly unleash some kind of doomsday weapon, right? If you're going to be on Alcatraz, right, you are going to have some jailbreaks and some, a lot of crawling through tunnels and things like that to be able to overcome some of these obstacles, right? So only one man's escaped from Alcatraz, so now you've got to go break him out of jail somewhere else so he can break you in. Interesting idea that could definitely be used in an RPG campaign, right? There could be an NPC that has certain knowledge. You have to get them out of the trouble they're in. Maybe you have to literally break them out of a jail cell or something, and then put them, get that knowledge and put that knowledge to use in in accomplishing whatever the party's goals are. So that's something that you could definitely use with your game group, right? They need knowledge. Put that NPC who has that knowledge in a jail. Put him in a prison. Put him on an island prison. Put him in some place where it's very difficult to get to them, so that your players have to do basically an action movie to get that NPC out, and then they have to do another one to stop the main villain of the campaign. Okay, Con Air, Nicolas Cage again here. This movie, of course, centers around convicts. It also centers around escapes, the attempted escapes, and the drama that can be created when prisoners are trying to escape. And that could be definitely used in your RPG campaign when you could certainly introduce an escape somehow that is happening and that the players have to interact with that. They have to prevent the escape, whatever it is. But kind of using an escape as a centerpiece could definitely be a very powerful trope. And like I said, it could be turned on its head in a number of different ways. It doesn't have to just be player characters escaping from something, right? It can be that they come across an escape of convicts. They're forced into making moral decisions about how they should stop them, or should they stop them. It could be very interesting type of campaign. Mask of Zorro, right? We're back to kind of adventure stories again, right? So Zorro obviously been made a number of times over the decades, but we get here just an action story, right? We have impersonation again. We have masked heroes, which are also very popular in fiction and in action movies. We have the villain who has raised the hero's child as his own, right? We have all kinds of deception and an oppressive government, oppressive leaders. You can't go through normal channels. You can't call the police. You can't get a lawyer. You have to have some man or some person take up the mantle, right, and put on the mask, who can rise above this and overthrow the oppressive regime and right all of these wrongs that oppressive ruler has brought about. The Matrix, 1999 here. This is obviously we get action mixed in with sci-fi again. Again, a lot of the same actors, right? We get Keanu Reeves again. Right. This is obviously there's a number of tropes that can be used here, right? We have Matrix, we have a VR world, we have the real world that's a post-apocalyptic nightmare. We have heroes that can operate in between both of those. A lot of different tropes that you can use, right? So you have the intelligent machines again, who are using humans as basically food or whatever it is. Battery power, I guess, here for the Matrix, right? And whatever. It seems like humans would be a very inefficient battery, but oh well, whatever. I don't know any of the stuff. But anyway, the idea though here is there is a lot here that can be used, right? This idea of the Matrix or VR in the future, intelligent machines. Of course, we have kind of the Messiah complex as well, right? We have this story around a chosen one, which I haven't really mentioned, but those are usually in different types of stories, but here we get kind of that chosen one story mixed with an action movie. And Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, right? Just a great film. An amazing film, again, from the other side of the world, right? But it comes mainstream. An amazing film that just mixes mysticism with martial arts. Kind of just an incredible mix. Can definitely be used in a D&D campaign with a magic item, a magic sword, people in secret, operating in secret, all kinds of things. Amazing stuff. We have an amazing cast. Chow Yun-fat, Michelle Yeoh, who is just brilliant, and Ziying Zia, I think is how you pronounce her name. Brilliant from start to finish. A powerful action movie. If you haven't seen this, you definitely have to see it, because it blends, like I said, magic with martial arts in like a fantasy setting. Just an incredible mind for us to use in our campaigns. All right, well, there you have it, guys. I know I went really long with this one, but I wanted to talk through a lot of movies. Of course, I could keep going and get into all the Marvel movies, but that is just almost too much, because I guess those would be considered action movies nowadays. But I wanted to, just to focus on some of the, the history of action movies and some of the quintessential examples of them, so we can see how we could use these situations in our own role-playing games, in Dungeons and Dragons, in whatever role-playing game we're playing. If you have any questions, guys, you can drop them in the comments below. If you want to check out my Dungeon Master and Game Master resource books, you can do so at dicegeeks.com. If you want even more interviews and content, you can check out my podcast. You can find all of that at dicegeeks.com. Also, stay tuned here to my YouTube channel, as I'll be dropping more videos in the future.